Parents told me they couldn't afford to help with my wedding dress. A simple one will do, they said. Then I saw my sister-in-law in a custom Vera Wang gown. They insisted on paying for everything, she smiled. I didn't show up to the reception. My name is Delia Monroe. I'm the youngest of 2 kids. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. If you've ever been, you know it's one of those beautiful small cities that feels like a tucked-away painting. The mountains cradle the city on all sides, and there's always something blooming. You smell honeysuckle walking down the street in spring. But for all its beauty, it wasn't a glamorous place to grow up, especially not in a blue-collar household. My parents, Patrick and Margie, have always been proud of being practical. That's their word for everything. Practical jobs. Practical meals. Practical expectations. My brother Dennis and I were raised to understand that money didn't grow on trees and that extravagance was for people who didn't know the value of a dollar. But what they meant was I needed to be practical. Dennis, somehow, didn't have to follow those rules. He's 5 years older than me and always the center of their universe. He got to quit sports when he didn't feel like going. He got a used car at 17. He had a graduation party even when he barely passed high school. When he dropped out of college midway through his sophomore year, our parents said, he's figuring things out. When I graduated magna cum laude, they sent a thumbs-up emoji to the family group chat. Dennis married Mallory, who came from money. Her family owns a few car dealerships and a lake house in South Carolina. She has perfect blonde hair, designer bags, and that polished way of speaking that makes waitresses apologize to her. I tried to like her, but she always treated me like I was auditioning to be in the family. Anyway, back to the wedding. When Julian proposed, I cried. Not just because I was happy, but because I'd finally found someone who treated me like a priority. He's quiet, artistic, sweet. The kind of person who picks wildflowers for the kitchen table and listens with both ears. I thought, maybe for once, my family would celebrate me. That they'd show up with the same energy they always had for Dennis. We wanted a small, beautiful ceremony. Nothing over the top, just something that felt like us. I pictured an outdoor wedding in September when Asheville is starting to crisp up for fall. Julian's family is from Pittsburgh, and they even offered to help with a few things to ease the cost. Still, weddings are expensive, and we had a tight budget. The dress was the one thing I couldn't compromise on. I didn't need Vera Wang, but I wanted something that made me feel special. Not extravagant, just special. So, one morning I brought it up over breakfast at my parents' house. It was a Sunday. The kitchen smelled like burned toast, and my dad was folding the newspaper the way he always did, like he was still pretending the internet didn't exist. I said gently, I've started looking at dresses. There's one I really love, but it's a little outside my budget. I was wondering if you could maybe help with part of it? They didn't even look up. Margie said, you don't need anything fancy. A simple one will do just fine. Patrick added, you're not one of those Instagram brides. I didn't argue. I nodded, stirred my coffee, and told them I understood. So I went to a closing sale at a local bridal shop and bought a discontinued dress that was a size too big and had a tiny stain at the hem. It was still beautiful. I hemmed it myself after work each night, sometimes until my fingers cramped. Julian told me I looked like magic when I tried it on for him. That helped. But it still stung. Especially when, 6 months before our wedding, Dennis and Mallory announced they were doing a vow renewal. They'd been married 3 years. No kids, no big milestone, just Mallory saying she wanted a second chance at the aesthetic. Her words. My parents were over the moon. They helped plan it. They bragged to friends. They posted teasers of the invitation cards on Facebook. The event was held at a vineyard just outside Hendersonville. Gorgeous, I'll admit. I wore a blue wrap dress and tried to ignore the fact that Mallory had a makeup artist, a flower wall, and an actual gospel choir. But the punch to the gut came when she walked down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang. Not just any Vera Wang, the gown she had flown to New York to try on in person. And I overheard her saying, Patrick and Margie insisted on paying. I didn't even ask. I remember just staring at her and then at my parents, who beamed like they were watching royalty. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I went into the restroom, sat on the toilet lid, and stared at the floor tiles until my vision stopped blurring. That day made something click. Or maybe snap. But I still didn't say anything. I told myself, don't cause drama. Don't make it about you. Then came my wedding day. The morning of my wedding was cloudy but warm. That soft, golden haze lingered in the sky, the kind that makes everything feel slightly enchanted. The cottage where I got ready had windows that opened to a small garden. I could hear crickets and the low hum of cars in the distance. Julian and I had decided to do everything close to home. Asheville isn't sprawling, and we liked the idea of everything being within arm's reach. We were getting married on the grounds of an old converted farmstead, just outside Black Mountain. There was a wooden arbor covered in wildflowers, folding chairs set in uneven rows, and a backdrop of trees so tall they looked painted on. It wasn't grand, but it was peaceful. I'd woken up early, sat on the edge of the bed in my robe, and stared at my dress hanging on the closet door. I'd grown proud of it, in a strange way. I knew every stitch. I knew where the lace puckered and where I'd redone a seam 3 times. It didn't cost thousands of dollars, but it carried my time, my effort, my quiet hope. The hairdresser arrived. My best friend, Tessa, brought coffee and moral support. Julian sent over a handwritten note that made me cry in front of 3 people. It was going smoothly. Peaceful, even. Until the text started rolling in. Mallory, hey, just a heads up, we're running late. Dennis forgot the cufflinks. Mom, we'll be there just before it starts. Had to stop and pick up flowers Mallory wanted for her seat. Dennis, parking terrible. Who planned this? I didn't respond. I just stared at my phone, then put it face down on the dresser. The ceremony was supposed to start at 2 p.m. By 2:10, Julian's family was all seated. My friends were milling around, trying not to look impatient. I was told we'd hold off a few more minutes because my parents hadn't arrived yet. They finally showed up at 2:22. My mom breezed in with Mallory behind her, laughing about some inside joke. My dad looked like he had just stepped out of a car dealership ad, polished, confident, important. No apology. No explanation. Just smiles and a comment about how you wouldn't believe the traffic on the I-40 today. I was standing behind the barn, out of view, and saw them walk in. Margie barely looked toward the makeshift bridal suite. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't check on me. Her full attention was on Mallory, who, despite not being in the wedding party, looked like she was trying to steal the show in a floor-length blush dress with sequins down the sides. But I got married. I stood up there and said my vows, and Julian said his, and we kissed, and everyone clapped. It was beautiful, and if I let myself forget everything else, it might have been the happiest I'd ever been. We were supposed to take photos after, and then drive to the reception together. The venue was a rustic lodge-style restaurant about 20 minutes away, nestled in a clearing off the Blue Ridge Parkway. We'd rented it out entirely for the evening. But after the ceremony, I needed a moment alone. I stepped behind the barn, sat on an overturned bucket, and took a breath. The dress itched at the back of my knees. My cheeks ached from smiling. And there was this building pressure in my chest, not from nerves, not from cold feet, but something else. Something older. My mom found me there. She sat on the edge of a low stone wall and crossed her legs delicately, as if we were about to have brunch. I think it went well, she said, already scrolling through her phone. Everyone said it was really sweet. I nodded, because what else was I going to do? Then she added, you know, if you'd invited more people, you might have had better pictures. Dennis had over 200 at his renewal. Just saying. And I broke. Not in a dramatic, scream until you're red way. I just sat there, watching her, realizing that I could scream or cry or disappear, and she'd still find a way to pivot the moment back to Dennis and Mallory. I asked you to help me with my dress, I said finally. Margie blinked, not looking up from her phone. What? I asked you to help. You told me to keep it simple. That a basic one would be fine. She sighed like I was bringing up something deeply inconvenient. Well, Mallory didn't ask. We offered. It was different. Different. Right. Not long after, Patrick walked over with Dennis. They were laughing about something Julian's uncle had said. I stood there in silence, this swirling mix of grief and clarity pooling in my stomach. Julian came to find me a minute later. His brow creased. Hey, everyone's headed to the reception. You okay? I looked at him and asked, would you be okay if I said I didn't want to go? He didn't ask why. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just looked at me, really looked, and said, whatever you need. And just like that, we got in the car. Still in my wedding dress. No dramatic exit. No scene. We drove the opposite direction of everyone else. He asked if I wanted to go to the lodge later, even just to make an appearance. I said no. I didn't want to celebrate with people who barely saw me. I didn't want to sit at a table across from parents who told me to settle while handing blank checks to someone else. We drove up the Blue Ridge Parkway until the sun started to dip low behind the trees. We found a food truck parked at a scenic overlook, tacos and churros. Julian took off his jacket, and we ate while sitting on the hood of the car. I kept my veil on. He kept calling me his wife. For a moment, the quiet was everything. The sun dipped lower as we finished our tacos. I remember the breeze shifting slightly, just enough to lift the edge of my veil. There was something cinematic about it. Not grand or flashy, just honest. Julian reached over and tucked a loose curl behind my ear, and for a few moments, we just watched the sky darken into that soft mountain blue. Neither of us said much. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't feel heavy, like silence was its own language. He didn't ask me again if I wanted to go back. He knew the answer without needing to hear it out loud. Eventually, we drove to the cottage we'd booked for our wedding night, this little Airbnb tucked into the woods near Weaverville. I remember stepping out of the car and realizing I was still in my dress. My train was covered in dirt and dried grass. My heels were blistering my toes. I looked like a bride who had wandered off halfway through her own story. Julian unlocked the door and held it open. Inside, it smelled like cedar and lemon cleaner. There were clean towels folded on the bed, and someone had left a note with a bottle of wine. Congratulations, lovebirds. I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my shoes slowly, one by one. My feet were raw. Julian handed me a pair of thick socks, and I put them on without a word. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed me one, and sat on the floor across from me. I'm glad you didn't go, he said after a while. To the reception, I mean. I looked at him. You are? He nodded. It would have been for them. Not for you. Not for us. And that hit me more than I expected. Because he was right. That whole day, the ceremony aside, felt like it was slipping into someone else's narrative. Like I was just a guest star in my own wedding. It was around 11 p.m. when my phone started buzzing again. Missed calls. Voicemails. Some from my parents. Some from Dennis. One from Mallory. At first, I ignored them. But curiosity got the better of me. I didn't want to talk to anyone, I just wanted to know. So I listened. Mallory's voicemail started with a long, dramatic sigh. Then she said, honestly, Delia, I just think it was really selfish. People flew in for this. Your parents paid for catering. And to walk out like that? It was embarrassing. Dennis, in his message, was shorter. You made Mom cry. Not cool. Then Margie's message, Delia, I don't understand what's gotten into you. You've always been so level-headed. Don't let your jealousy ruin your life. Call me back when you're ready to apologize. I listened to it twice. The words rolled over me like rain against a windshield. Muffled. Distant. Unwelcome. Jealousy. That was the word she used. As if I was bitter that Mallory had a better dress. As if it was about the gown and not the years of being told to settle, to shrink, to make room for someone else's shine while being asked to dim my own. I didn't call back. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the week after. We stayed in the cottage through Sunday, barely checking our phones. Julian's parents called once just to check and they were worried something had happened. We told them we were fine and that we just needed space. They understood. When we returned to Asheville on Monday, the fallout had already started. My mother had posted a Facebook status that simply said, "Some people know how to ruin a beautiful day." Mallory liked it. Dennis commented, "Unreal." Friends texted, asking if I was okay. A few of them had heard things rumors passed around like napkins at a cocktail party. That I'd had a breakdown. That I'd accused Mallory of stealing my thunder. That I'd stormed off mid-ceremony, which wasn't even remotely true. Only a handful of people knew what actually happened. Tessa, my best friend, had stayed late at the reception and tried to do damage control. She told me later that when people asked where I was, my mother said, "She's sensitive. You know how Delia is." That line stuck with me. You know how Delia is. Like I was a problem to be managed. Like I was a fragile vase someone kept putting on the wrong shelf. 2 days later, my parents showed up at our apartment without warning. I opened the door and saw them standing there, both holding a gift basket wrapped in cellophane and ribbons. Crackers, jam, chocolate-covered pretzels. A bottle of sparkling cider. I remember wondering how long they'd spent assembling it, or if they'd just grabbed it off a display at Fresh Market. "We thought we'd stop by," Margie said brightly, like she hadn't left me a voicemail accusing me of jealousy. "Talk things through." Julian was in the kitchen, out of view. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Patrick held the basket out. "This is from all of us. Just a little something." I didn't take it. Instead, I said, "You paid for Mallory's gown. You gave her a ceremony and a choir and whatever else she wanted. I asked for help with a single thing. And you told me I didn't need anything special." Margie stiffened. "We didn't know it meant that much to you." I stared at her. "But you offered it to her. Without her asking." There was a long pause. Patrick finally said, "We thought she could use the support." I blinked. "And I couldn't?" They didn't answer. I added, "I'd been the second priority for 30 years. You always said it was because things were tight. But apparently, it was just me who didn't deserve the effort." My mom frowned. "You're blowing this out of proportion." And that was it for me. "I don't think we have anything else to talk about," I said. "Please don't come by again unannounced." I went back inside, left them standing on the porch with their jam basket. That was the last time I saw them face to face. It took a long time for the noise to quiet down. The days after that visit from my parents were heavy, not in the kind of way where you cry all the time, but in that subtle, invisible weight on your chest way. Like you're walking through water. I found myself going over everything they said, everything they didn't say on a loop in my head. I didn't tell anyone right away that I'd cut them off. Not officially. I think I was still waiting for something, an apology, a letter, even a moment of self-awareness from one of them. Something small to show they understood. But nothing came. Just silence. Like they were waiting for me to feel guilty. A week after we returned from our short getaway, I received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was my mother's. Inside was a note written on stiff cream stationery that said, "Delia, we're disappointed in how things turned out, but we still love you. We hope you'll come to your senses and reach out when you're ready to be a family again. Love, Mom and Dad." That was it. No mention of the wedding dress. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. No responsibility taken. Just, The assumption that I was the one who broke something and needed to fix it. Julian found me sitting on the couch with the note in my lap, unmoving. "What did they say?" he asked, gently. I handed it to him without a word. He read it, folded it back up, and said, "You don't owe them anything." I nodded. But it still hurt. Not in that fresh wound kind of way anymore. It was more like a dull ache, chronic, familiar. That kind of sadness you carry with you quietly because it's too complicated to explain. And the thing was, they weren't done. Not by a long shot. Mallory kept tagging me in posts. Not directly, more passive-aggressive stuff. Instagram photos of her and my mom having lunch, captions like "mother-daughter dates are the best." A photo of her wedding dress hanging in her closet, with the hashtag best day ever gain. Things like that. I ignored them, unfollowed, muted, tried to block her entirely from my mental space. But they had this way of creeping in. Dennis emailed me. Once. It was short and smug: "You embarrassed Mom and Dad. You should grow up and stop being bitter. They've always supported you, maybe not with money, but with everything that counts." I didn't reply. What could I possibly say to that? That emotional support without emotional safety means nothing? That constantly being told to be grateful while being treated like a backup plan isn't support, it's manipulation? It wasn't worth the oxygen. Instead, I buried myself in work. I was freelancing part-time and teaching creative writing at the community college by then. My students kept me grounded. Teenagers and adults in night classes who brought stories from real-life poverty, struggle, joy, heartbreak. They weren't pretending. They didn't have to be perfect to be heard. One evening, after class, a student named Renee stayed behind to ask for feedback on her short story. It was about a girl who runs away from home on her wedding day, not because she didn't love the groom, but because she realized she didn't love who she was in that family. I told her the piece was powerful. And I meant it. Later that night, I cried in the bathtub for the first time in weeks. Not because of what happened, but because I didn't know who I was outside of it. It's strange, that feeling. When your identity is built around surviving people who never fully saw you, what do you become when you finally step away from them? Julian and I talked about therapy, and eventually I started seeing someone. Her name was Dr. Genevieve Locke. Sharp eyes, soft voice, zero tolerance for self-gaslighting. In one of our early sessions, I explained the whole wedding situation, thinking she might tell me I overreacted. She didn't. Instead, she said, "It sounds like your family had one rulebook for your brother and another for you. You stopped playing along. That tends to shake things up." I remember blinking at her like she'd just solved a math equation I'd spent a decade trying to work out. "It's not your job to earn love," she added. "Not in families. Not in marriages. Not anywhere." Week by week, I untangled the knots I didn't even realize I'd been living with. That feeling that I had to overperform just to be worth something. That any emotional reaction I had was a flaw. That asking for support made me needy. That silence was maturity. That being the easy one meant I was strong. I started saying things out loud for the first time, even just to myself. Like, I deserved better. Or, that was not okay. Julian supported me every step of the way. He never tried to fix it. He never said let it go. He just held space for me, real, honest space. Eventually, the emails and messages from my family tapered off. At first, it was like they were playing chicken, waiting for me to be the one to break the silence. But when I didn't, they stopped trying. The absence became the new normal. What surprised me, though, was how others reacted. Aunt Marie, my mom's older sister, called me out of the blue one Sunday. She said, "I know I'm not supposed to meddle, but I've watched you shrink yourself around them your whole life." What you did? Walking away? That took courage. We talked for over an hour. Then there was my cousin Nicole, who sent me a handwritten card. Just one sentence inside, I saw it too. That sentence meant more than any essay ever could. Still, the silence wasn't easy. I wasn't angry all the time, I was just tired. Tired of explaining, tired of wondering, tired of holding on to hope that maybe one day they'd get it. And yet, some nights, I'd still lie awake thinking about the way my mom used to braid my hair when I was little, or how my dad would hum old Motown songs while grilling burgers. There were good memories, too. That was the hardest part. Learning that you can miss people and still know you can't let them back in. About a year after the wedding, Julian and I moved. We had been considering it for months, and when a job opportunity came up for him in Pittsburgh, we took it. I didn't hesitate. Asheville had always been beautiful, but it was heavy with memory. And now that my relationships there had splintered, it felt like I was walking through a town filled with closed doors. We bought a little bungalow outside the city, nothing fancy, just ours. I started teaching at a community college full-time. I planted a garden. Julian and I took long walks through Frick Park and learned to make pierogies from scratch. Our life slowly took on a rhythm that felt whole, like a song without background noise. I didn't hear much from my family during that first year. A few passive-aggressive holiday emails. One birthday card signed in Margie's handwriting with the words, "Love you anyway." I didn't reply. I wasn't being petty, I just didn't feel the need to feed the same cycle that had drained me for so long. But then, 2 years later, something changed. It was subtle at first. Mallory started tagging my name in weird posts again, quotes about loyalty and family betrayal, and how some people always play the victim. I ignored her. Then Dennis sent a message, the first in a long time. It said, "Hey. Not sure if you've heard. Dad's been having some health stuff. Nothing major yet. Just thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply to that either. Because I had heard Aunt Marie had kept in touch, and she'd already told me that Dad's health stuff was seasonal blood pressure and some cholesterol issues. Manageable. Not urgent. But I knew what this was. It was the start of the pull-back-in campaign. And I wasn't interested. What I was interested in, however, was something Aunt Marie mentioned a week later on one of our calls. "They've been telling people Dennis is opening his own dealership," she said casually. "Apparently your dad's helping him set it up. Risky, but I suppose they believe in him." I blinked. Dennis is opening a business? With what money? Oh, they pulled from the retirement account. Remortgaged the house, too. They're all in. I felt the tiniest flicker of surprise but not sympathy. More like confirmation. Of course. Of course they were betting the farm on Dennis again. Same playbook, new chapter. "Is it going well?" I asked. "Well," she said slowly, "not exactly." That's when she told me the real story. Turns out, Dennis didn't exactly have a solid business plan. He had an idea: an overpriced luxury used car showroom with champagne for clients and leather couches in the lobby, but no experience, no budget discipline, and no staff worth keeping. He was charming but sloppy. And within 8 months of opening, things were already cracking. Missed loan payments. Supplier delays. Disgruntled customers. Even a Better Business Bureau complaint. And here's where the revenge part starts, not because I did something to them, but because I didn't. Because I stayed silent. I stayed gone. And it drove them crazy. See, the one thing they never expected, the real punishment, was that I wouldn't be around to catch them when they fell. That the daughter they'd always expected to stay quiet, to be understanding, to be practical and selfless and endlessly available had finally stopped orbiting around their chaos. They started calling more often after that. Messages from Margie got softer in tone. Less defensive. More, "We'd love to reconnect, and life is short, and we just want to fix things." I didn't block them. But I didn't reply either. Then, a letter arrived. This one wasn't handwritten, it was typed, printed, and signed at the bottom in both of their names. It started with a mild apology. "We may have made mistakes. We didn't always know how to express support. We see that now. Then came the part they really wanted me to read. We're asking if you'd be willing to co-sign a loan with Dennis. He's been working so hard, and things just haven't gone as planned. We know you're in a more stable place now and thought you might be able to help. I stared at that letter for 10 full minutes before laughing out loud. Not bitterly. Not angrily. Just in pure, stunned amusement. They hadn't just failed to recognize the damage they'd done, they were now circling back to ask me to fix it. To finance it. To help the brother who'd spent years mocking my soft skills and calling my job cute, while wearing a $4,000 suit paid for with my parents' retirement. Julian read the letter. He looked at me and said, "You gonna frame it?" I actually considered it. Instead, I mailed it back. No note. No message. Just their letter, folded neatly, with the word "NO" written across it in red ink. I thought that would be the last I'd hear. But a few weeks later, I got another email, this one from Mallory, of all people. Long and rambling. She was upset. She said Dennis was depressed. That my parents were heartbroken. That I was proving them right about how cold I could be. She ended with, "This was your chance to show you're the bigger person." I read it once, closed it, and archived it. Because here's the thing, being the bigger person doesn't mean making yourself small. It doesn't mean forgiving people who aren't sorry. It doesn't mean giving when you're empty, or stretching until your soul aches just to make others comfortable. Sometimes, being the bigger person means walking away, staying quiet, and letting people face the consequences of the very world they built without you. And that, finally, was the revenge. Not petty. Not cruel. Just real. I chose peace. And they chose to underestimate me.